Hello, welcome. My name is Nolfus, and today I'm going to talk about map difficulty and how to build for it. I've been doing viewer map review on my Twitch for quite a while now, and I noticed that a lot of people don't really understand map difficulty. The obvious definition is how hard a map is to drive, but that's not very specific or useful. In my mind, there's two main types of difficulty: organic difficulty and punishments. Organic difficulty comes with building a well-calculated route. Basically, how often is the route going to force the player to make a mistake? Punishments, on the other hand, artificially make a map harder by taking those mistakes and punishing the player for making them. In my opinion, this is what's holding a lot of builders' maps from getting through map review. Like I said before, I don't think a lot of people have a good grasp of this concept, and knowing the difference between these two and learning what they are could be the difference between getting track of the day and failing at map review. That's not the only area where this is useful though. Learning where to ramp up the difficulty and how can also help with building any type of map, whether it's for a competition, a trial map, or just messing with your friends. Just like with all my tips, they don't apply to every situation, but if you know what you're building for and have a specific goal in mind, I think knowing the differences will be very helpful. So let's get started. This is Echoic. It's a transitional tech map that I didn't really build for track of the day, but I did send it through map review since I thought it could make it, and I'm honestly really proud of this map. However, that idea was short-lived. The players seemed to like it, but all agreed that it was too difficult. When some of the people who had played the map outside of map review asked how it was faring, I told them the map was too hard, and they were always surprised. A comment would normally follow about how bad the map review players are and how the map wasn't even that difficult to begin with. For the record, I agree that the map isn't that hard. At the same time, I also think the map was too difficult for map review. However, we've definitely had much harder maps than Echoic make it through the system and become track of the day, so what gives? How can my map simultaneously be easy and too hard for map review? The key is the difference between organic difficulty and punishments. To get what I'm talking about, let's define these terms a bit more with some examples. In my opinion, organic difficulty is best described by one style: full speed. Known as one of the hardest styles in the entire game, it takes hundreds of hours to get good at full speed maps. Despite this, it's also one of the most popular types of tracks with newer players. On the surface, it's easy to see why. The car is going super fast, these maps tend to be fairly easy to complete, and the style isn't that punishing of mistakes. Some of you might scoff at that last reason, but it's true. A full speed map isn't defined by speed checks or taking very narrow wall rides at high speeds that are common elements. Instead, for a map to be considered one from the style, it only needs a single element: speed slides. It's usually very easy to go into a full speed map, perform little to no speed slides, and get to the finish. If it's not possible, the mapper had to make the conscious decision to add elements to make it that way. However, just because you have a clean run doesn't mean you're close to the world record, and you have to put in a lot of work to get within even a couple seconds. This is what it means to be organically difficult. The player can go through the entire map without touching any walls, clipping corners, or anything, and still be far from the top players. On the other hand, let's take a look at another inherently difficult style, but this one is almost universally hated by newer players: ice. I know this is going to sound crazy to some of you, but driving ice at a basic level is much easier than people think. If someone takes 30 minutes to learn the basics of ice sliding and how it works, almost every ice map becomes very easy to finish. Yeah, there's still a lot of organic difficulty, as even a decent ice run will still be a few seconds away from the top of the leaderboards, but the main reason people hate ice and why players throw a fit whenever one gets selected as track of the day is because of punishments. Ice is unintuitive. That's why you have to go out of your way to learn it. But what happens if you mess up? If you get off the wrong line or mismanage your gears, you get what's known as a slide out. The car loses all grip and just slides in a straight line for a bit until it feels like regaining control at some point. Almost no other style has this level of punishment for messing up one turn. Instead of losing a bit of speed, you're losing everything, and that's why ice is so hard. There's a fair amount of organic difficulty once you know what you're doing, but it's the harsh punishments that really take it to the next level. As you can probably tell from these examples, one type of difficulty is much more accepted by general audiences. Going back to Echoic for a moment, let's take a look at what we know now and see why this map failed in the map review server. The organic difficulty is about where it should be. Tech is one of those styles that is organically difficult, as holding drift for too long will lose you speed, but there's also some punishments as not holding brake long enough will force you to hit a wall. But that's not really what the map review people complained about. If the drifts were uncalculated and didn't make sense, the people that played the map outside of map review would have told me that the route felt off and awkward. So if it wasn't the tech part, let's take a look at the transitional part. Each one of these transitions can be taken with relatively low speed, so you don't need perfect drifts in order to make it. However, what happens if we're off the intended line a bit? Oh, well, that's just one. I mean, that does, oh, wait, there's another one. Ooh, that one doesn't look too friendly either. Oh, okay. I'm starting to get it. Thank you. For the people who drove Echoic by themselves in their own time, it took a few minutes to learn the transitions, but once you did, they were fine and didn't pose that much of a problem. However, if you had much less time to figure them out, let's just say a random number, I don't know, 3 minutes, there was a very real chance of not finishing the map at all, meaning that the map was simultaneously not too hard and way too difficult for map review. If you're in the same boat I was, I would recommend taking a look at how punishing your map is. When it's up in map review, watch how other people are driving. If they're having to constantly respawn and restart the map without making it to the end, the map is most likely too punishing. There is one clarification I would like to make though. Despite what I said about Echoic and Ice, punishments aren't inherently bad and can actually be a very good thing for a map, even for Track of the Day. Punishments might add a bit more artificial difficulty into a route, but this can turn a very meh route into one that's much more exciting. Grass, for instance, is known as a boring, easy style. It's not uncommon for people to spam Bedge in Twitch chats whenever a grass map gets unveiled as Track of the Day. Grass doesn't really have a lot going on by itself, but adding some other style that's inherently more punishing, such as transitional, can really shake things up and elevate a map above the sea of mediocre. At least, I can sit here and say to stop making maps punishing or to add more punishments into a route, but how do you do that? What do you look for when building one over the other? The good news is that once you know what you're looking for, it's not too hard to either add or remove elements. The main thing to keep in mind is what the map needs and what you're building for. The mistake I see most often is making maps that are too punishing and trying to get Track of the Day with them. So let's cover how to reduce punishments first. When trying to spot how punishing your map is, try to keep in mind what happens if a player makes a mistake in an element. Do they have to respawn, or is it just some speed loss? What happens now that they have the lower speed? When are they able to recover? Some very common punishments I see being unintentionally built into maps are speed checks, uphills right after a drift, and bad checkpoint placements. Speed checks come in several shapes and sizes, but they're almost always jumps that can only be taken smoothly if the player is going at a certain speed. If the speed check is difficult enough, it can disqualify your map from being Track of the Day at all, so it's best to minimize these where possible. However, most jumps are calculated for the best speed you can get, so how do you account for someone slower? Well, instead of having a sharp cutoff, you should be using a slope that will catch a slower player instead. This will allow more people to finish in map review and be much friendlier in general. Now, what's wrong with uphills? I've recommended them several times in the past, and they're very useful. You just have to be a bit careful. This isn't exclusive to uphills right after a drift, but it's what I see most often. If a player crashes a corner or messes up whatever element, their speed is going to be a lot lower. Don't worry, they can get it all back. Right after this uphill. It makes the previous element very important to get right, as the punishment of a mistake will get extended through the entire uphill duration. In the worst offenders, there's actually no difference in crashing once and pressing DNF in Cup of the Day.
Yeah,
Okay, I
respawn?
land.
Guys,
Oh my
I did
god.
a tactical warping and it kind of worked.
Minus. There are no flying respawns.
Crap.
Map. Honestly,
Crap.
map. Dude,
Wait, are you saving me?
I cannot even make the looping. Like, this map is not
Thank
respawnable.
you, Brady, I love you.
Yeah, dude, the map is not respawnable, man.
Yeah, I'm literally no idea what would you do also
What the
Frick.
f? Yeah, it's not
You
respawnable.
just pray and try to survive.
Yeah, dude,
Frick.
fuck off, man. Why is the map not respawnable, man? Like, I crashed there in the checkpoint, have a
Crap.
flying respawn, I have to respawn, and you have to go with no speed up that hill.
Hopefully, I don't have to explain why that's a massive feels bad for the player. Thankfully, there's a few things you can do to help this. Putting a custom double respawn is a good option, as well as shortening the uphill itself and making sure there's room to recover before you enter it. Uphills aren't a bad thing, but be a little careful with them. The most common punishment I see, though, are bad checkpoint placements. Checkpoints in TM 2020 serve three main purposes. The first is cut prevention, as without them, there's nothing stopping the player from driving directly to the finish. The second is as a recovery option from crashing, and the third is as a practice tool. It can be very useful to respawn a few times before a tricky element to try to figure out the right line. It seems pretty straightforward, but the latter two uses requires some space between the checkpoint and the element to fix what went wrong. A great example is a checkpoint during or right before a jump. Especially if you can't see the landing zone when you take off, it's pretty likely the player will misalign the jump in the first couple tries. Don't worry, they can just respawn and try again. Oh, there's no room to adjust. Well, I mean, that's okay. There's always a double respawn. And that doesn't work either. Alright, well, time to restart the map. Letting players adjust their line before an element will let them fix their mistakes and make learning a map a lot easier. Those are the most common unintentional punishments I see in map review, and you'll notice there are some common ideas they all share. It's all about minimizing the impact mistakes have on a run. I'd recommend doing this on styles that are inherently punishing, such as ice, tech, and transitional. A map should have some level of punishments. It's never about getting rid of them entirely, but if you notice quite a few people in map review aren't finishing the map, it might be worth it to double check why they aren't finishing. However, not all maps need to get rid of punishments. Sometimes you need to add them. For styles with low punishments, such as grass, dirt, and speed fun, it's a great way to add excitement. My favorite way is to add cool transitions. These are a great way to break up the monotony of some turn combinations and to get the players back on track. Transitions often only work when coming from a certain angle and can also be a good way to corral players back on track in styles that tend to have wide platforms. Outside of that, some well-placed obstacles will also make sections more interesting, but you have to do it right. Don't mess with the elements themselves and instead focus on restricting the exit and time between each one. You don't want to restrict all possible lines except for one, as part of the fun of grinding a map is trying a few different lines and seeing which one is the best. And letting players take elements differently also lets people express themselves and how much they're willing to risk. Another tip is to never put an obstacle directly on the best line. You want to reward players for driving well, not punish them by giving them another thing to avoid. If you're unsure on where the best line is, I'd just avoid placing punishments in that area in general. Part of getting better with mapping is being able to identify that best line, and I'd rather err on the side of caution. Another tip is to take that low punishment style and combine it with a high punishment style. Grass and tech make a good combination, for example, as well as dirt and ice. Sprinkling in sections of each will help balance out the difficulty curve and let players recover from each element. And that's really what the goal is here, balancing out the difficulty in a way that makes the map fun to drive and hunt. I've given some of my favorite tips when building, as well as things to avoid. Hopefully, you can learn from my mistakes and apply it to your maps. I know a lot of people struggle with map review right now, and anything helps, so good luck. Even if you aren't building for track of the day, it's a good idea to keep these in mind, as it'll help you go for whatever difficulty you want. With that, I think that's all I have to offer. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, screams of anguish, feel free to leave them down below. If you did find this video useful and are looking for more Trackmania mapping content, you're in the right place, and I'd appreciate it if you considered liking the video and subscribing. If you're looking for feedback on your own maps, I do viewer map review on my Twitch every Wednesday night, so if you'd like to drop your map in for that, join my Discord, and you can start submitting maps a day early. Sometimes spots fill up quickly, so the earlier the better. Link to both my Twitch and Discord will be in the description. With all of the self-advertising out of the way, I'd like to thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. I really do appreciate it. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to make the world's friendliest ice full speed map. Bye!